Yes, I have.
Could we see them?
I don't think I'm going to share them with you.
So we took our own X-ray pictures with a machine much less sophisticated than that of U.S. Customs. And this is what our suitcase looked like a pipe bomb was inside.
If you didn't detect this, you wouldn't have detected the real thing. He missed it, and he's covering up.
As a final step, the container was trucked to a warehouse at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge, across the river from Lower Manhattan.
If that were a weapon and you blew it up, you would have very, very substantial consequences, yeah.
Of course, the material we moved was not dangerous and entirely legal to transport. And even the Customs Commissioner acknowledges our project helps to point out it's just far too easy, Peter, to put something on a ship and send it to this country.
Chilling project. Many thanks, Brian Ross. There were, and we just don't have a lot of time for them this evening, commemorations all over the world today. People in so many countries wanted to participate in this day with the United States, but we have a couple of glimpses. Here is a beach in Australia where hundreds of people commemorated this day. Yes, I thought we'd get a glimpse of it by making a flag out of people who were there. There were two powerful beams of light projected into the sky in Paris, reminiscent of what they did here at Ground Zero some months ago, a symbol of the trade counters. And in Venice, in Italy, the city's gondoliers observed a moment of silence, and on so many of the gondolas today, you could see large, billowing, in most cases, American flags. In a minute, we are going to begin our ABC News special coverage for the evening of 9/11. We've been on since early morning, as you know. We want to end this particular portion of the day with something called the Rolling Requiem. Last year, some members of the Seattle Symphony began to explore an idea. What if, on this September the 11th, singers in many parts of the world could join together in singing an extraordinary piece of music, which is Mozart's Requiem, which he wrote in memory of a nobleman's wife to be performed during her funeral. He died while composing it. It would start this Requiem at the bottom of the world with the first dawn of the day. People would sing it in every time zone for 24 hours. The response to the idea was absolutely huge. It began in Auckland, New Zealand.
our supervisor picked up our line to the White House and started relaying to them the information. We have an unidentified, very fast-moving aircraft inbound toward your vicinity, 8 miles west, 7 miles west, and it went 6, 5, 4.
He said, uh-oh, we just lost the bogey. Meaning the target went off the screen. So I said, well, where is it? And he said, well, we're not really sure.
I happened to look up to my left, and there is the airplane. The airplane is about 25 feet above the ground, and it's about 150 to 200 yards away and coming at us.
It is 9:38. Just 52 minutes have passed since the first attack. Firefighter Alan Wallace is on duty next to the helicopter landing pad on the west side of the Pentagon.
I look up and see the airplane. I hear the noise from the airplane, and bang, the airplane hits the building. And that's how fast it happened. The whole building jumped.
Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld is on the 4th floor of the Pentagon, around the corner from the impact.
The table shook and the building shook, and it felt like a bomb hit the building.
352. I think we just had an airplane crash east here. Must be in the district area.
Husband Shipton is on the phone. There, what's that we're looking at?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out right now. I'm direct, and there is visible smoke coming from that area. High visible smoke. Any unit responding to check the area of the Pentagon, advise on channel 1. American Airlines plane headed east down over the pike, possibly toward
The Pentagon, a plane has crashed into the Pentagon.
I don't believe I was knocked down, but I did at a certain point when I thought I was on fire. I thought I had ran as far as I should run, and then I hit the ground.
I went downstairs and went outside and around the corner, and of course there it was.
Everything around the fire truck and the fire station, including the blacktop that surrounds the fire truck, was on fire. There were trees along the side of the Pentagon, the leaves were on fire.
There was metal all over the grass, and there were people coming out of the building hurt, and people were assisting them.
Almost directly behind the fire truck, there are people trying to get out of the building, and there is someone back there who is trying to help them.
Other firefighters from nearby Fort Myer and Arlington, Virginia, joined the rescue efforts.
From the time we first assembled there, I would say 30 seconds later, there were probably 30 people there. And 30 seconds after that, there were probably 100 people there.
Among those helping the wounded and injured is the 69-year-old Rumsfeld himself.
There was a young woman bleeding, sitting on the ground, and I think she said to me, she didn't know who I was, she said she could see people holding drips going into people, IV of some kind, and she said something to the effect, if someone could bring that person over, I could hold it.
The Secretary of Defense is outside the burning building, while inside the Pentagon,
For 30 minutes, we couldn't find him. And just as we began to worry, he walked into the door of the National Military Command Center.
Very, very quickly, he's in there in his shirt sleeves, as I recall.
on 9/11, General Richard Myers steps in as acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
It's, from my viewpoint, a very professional scene. There was no panic, no undue alarm.
High overhead, jet fighters arrive, just moments too late.
Get in closer, I can start to see smoke coming up. I looked down and started seeing the landmarks, and that was obviously the Pentagon was on fire. You know, looking down and actually seeing the Pentagon burning, you know, big black billowing smoke out of it. Just looking back, and I'm thinking, we're at war.
In the Pentagon Command Center, General Winfield is juggling a secret conference call.
We added the White House, and we added Air Force One to the conference. All of the governmental agencies that were involved in any activity that was going on in the United States at that point were in the conference.
Rumsfeld orders U.S. forces to DEFCON 3, the highest alert for the nuclear arsenal in 30 years.
Smoke got intense at one point. I actually recommended the Secretary, maybe we ought to think about an alternate location.
They wanted to evacuate us in the building, and I decided I preferred to stay.
Instead, Rumsfeld sends his deputy, Paul Wolfowitz, to a secret remote bunker where there is a duplicate of the Pentagon's command and control system.
We flew them out by helicopter to Site R. The deputy secretary flew out there, and he was in charge of our ultimate site.
Just moments earlier on Capitol Hill to testify before Senator Edward Kennedy's Education Committee, the First Lady learns about the New York attacks.
Our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism and that our support goes to the rescue workers.
We had walked down the corridor, and just as we were about to get in the elevators, the Secret Service said, is there someplace we can go right away? And we heard that the Pentagon had been struck.
The Pentagon crash literally reverberates in congressional corridors. In under an hour, 3 hijacked planes have struck buildings in New York City and Washington. Police warn the leaders of Congress the Capitol building could be next.
Well, he said, we think there's a plane heading for the Capitol. Some Capitol policemen broke into the room and said, we're under attack. I've got to take you out right away. And so I hung up the phone and looked back down the window, or out my window and down the mall. This huge cloud of rolling black blue smoke was coming across.
When I looked out that window in my office, I could see the smoke billowing up from the Pentagon. And my immediate impression, we're fixing to get big. And let's get out of here.
People were just... I've never...
Spreads of another hijacked plane.
The plane is heading for the Capitol.
The Senate chaplain offers a prayer.
So, Lord, be with us.
Moving everybody back. Moving everybody back.
I'm thinking to myself, here I am, Speaker of the House, something I never dreamed would ever happen to me. And put in one of our secure automobiles, and the next thing I knew, I was hurtling through the back streets of Washington.
The other leaders jam into a room 2 blocks from the Capitol.
We were in a vulnerable position. We were all in one place, and I started asking, who's in charge here?
We were like everybody else. We were in complete chaos.
I think it might be a good idea if we got out of this crowd situation.
Some leaders rush to the west front of the Capitol where military helicopters await.
Then we flew over the Pentagon. We saw the remnants of an airplane into the side of the side of the Pentagon with this whole facade paved in, black smoke, and thousands of people gathered around. It was a terrible sight.
While in Florida, the president hurries aboard Air Force One.
He was virtually shoved on board the plane. The rest of us being forced to move faster, faster, faster to get on board.
The president sat down in his chair, motioned to the chair across from his desk for me to sit down. And before we could both of us sit down and put on our seatbelts, they were rolling the plane. And they stood that 747 on its tail and got it to about 45,000 feet, but as quick as I think you can get a big thing like that up in the air.
It is 9:55 a.m.
It seemed we were wheels up in nanoseconds.
Ellen Eckert is a White House stenographer.
The chatter in the press section of the plane where I was sitting was, where are we going? And we were looking out the windows, trying to see if we could figure out geographically where we were going.
That's what the president is trying to decide up front.
I was focused on getting the president in a safe environment, which meant on the plane, and the plane should be in the air. And then it became a question as where should the plane go?
He said, I'm coming back. And I said, you may not want to do that, Mr. President, because Washington's under attack. We don't know where the next attack is coming.
Press Secretary Ari Fleischer is keeping notes.
Turned to the head of the Secret Service detail and he said, I want to go back home ASAP. I don't want whoever is doing this to hold me outside of Washington. And the head of the Secret Service detail said to him, our people are saying it's too unsteady still.
There was a little bit of pulling and pushing with him to suggest that we should fly to a secure location and where we could have good communication and then make a decision when he should return to Washington.
When I got to the bunker, the president was talking to the vice president on the phone, and the vice president was saying the same thing. You can't come back here.
At that point, urged him not to return to Washington because it was clear then that an attack included Washington as well.
So it was on the basis of that third plane that you said at that point to the president, you can't come back here.
Right. We don't know what's happening.
On board Air Force One, we seemed to be flying forever, and one of the Secret Service agents leaned over to me and said, look down there. We're at 44,000 feet, and we're not going back to Washington.
Deep beneath the White House, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta issues an unprecedented order.
Their planes are coming into the eastern seaboard, turn them around and get them going west. If they're going west, have them land at their destination. But in any event, if they're not too far away, have them land.
More than 4,000 planes are in the skies over the U.S. FAA policy allows pilots to use their own discretion to decide where and when they land in an emergency. But on this morning,
I said, screw pilot discretion. Get the damn planes down.
up above, the Secret Service orders the White House staff to evacuate.
As soon as we were outside, Secret Service agents told us to run, and they kept yelling to run. And if you looked at their faces, they wanted us to run.
Everybody out! Everybody out!
One of them yelled, you know, women, take off your heels and run. Take off your heels and run. And so I did. I took them off and I started running as fast as I could. The gates opened and we all went pouring out.
Dozens of fighters are buzzing in the sky. F-16s scramble at Andrews Air Force Base in nearby Maryland.
We were told to get airborne and protect the Capitol. I believe there's over 20 fighters, plus tankers, AWACS, you know, the other support airplanes. Total military in the area, I'd say it was probably 30-plus airplanes.
Well, it never in my wildest dreams occurred to me that one day I'd be orbiting over the Pentagon that had just been hit, looking for possible incoming aircraft.
In the Pentagon Command Center, there's a report of another hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 93.
We received a report from the FAA that Flight 93 had turned off its transponder, had turned, and was now heading towards Washington, D.C.
We rapidly developed some rules of engagement for what our military aircraft might do in the event another aircraft appeared to be heading into some large civilian structure or population.
I said if we get another one of these, well, you're going to have to shoot it down.
You heard the Speaker of the House of Representatives say there, it can't be happening to us so much now that we didn't know then. In the next half hour, you will see how this crisis led the nation's leaders to create rules of engagement for something never before done in American history, ordering the military to shoot down a civilian aircraft.
When we come back, life and death decisions in the skies over Washington.
This is the first time in my career that I ever actually wanted to go out and use my airplane to kill someone.
ABC's coverage of 9/11 will continue in a moment.
This woman is in hiding because of the story she has to tell about Saddam Hussein. Thursday, Saddam's Secrets and the woman who says she was his secret mistress on prime time.
He never saved another's life. He never ruled a nation. He never led men in desperate battle. And yet his whole life is a story of heroism. And his victory will thrill your heart. Christopher Reeve, Courageous Steps, next Wednesday at 10/9 Central on ABC.
The world for me that day became redefined into before and after, but also redefined are the meaning of words like bravery and courage and strength and grace and resolve.
The Lighthouse Big September Sale is heating up with savings up to 40% off on top brand spas. Many floor model and scratch and dent items are priced below wholesale. Slate pool tables start at just $7.99 and get special financing only at Lighthouse.
Newborn suffers cerebral palsy, which was preventable with an early C-section.
A young mother of two was going in for the birth of her third child when the fetal heart monitor showed the heart rate had dropped to a dangerous level, causing a lack of oxygen to the brain. An earlier C-section delivery would have prevented the resulting cerebral palsy. Our team of attorneys, doctors, and nurses uncover the truth behind medical mistakes. Let our team work for you. Call 1-888-ELK, Ohio.
Elk and Elk, serious lawyers for serious injuries.
You can spend more or you can spend less, but you simply can't get a better quality window at a lower price. I guarantee it. Call the Window Factory. And remember, you can't get a better quality window at a lower price.
It seemed like the entire world was rocked when those two planes hit and the terrorists struck and killed thousands of people at the World Trade Center. Our lives were turned upside down, topsy-turvy. I don't think we'll ever be the same again.
ABC News, 9/11 continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our coverage of the first anniversary. In this half hour, we will continue our extraordinary look behind the scenes on the day that America was attacked on board Air Force One with the President at the site of the crash of the hijacked plane in rural Pennsylvania and in the secret bunkers where the government leaders took shelter. Here again is Charles Gibson.
It is just before 10 a.m. Jet fighters swarm around the Capitol.
One whole side of the Pentagon is just completely burning. There's ashes falling, and there's fumes in the air, and the smoke is billowing around.
Only minutes before, the Pentagon was struck by a hijacked airplane.
This is the first time in my career that I ever actually wanted to go out and use my airplane to kill someone.
Only an hour has passed since the attacks began in New York City.
In the defense of the nation's capital, we would have done what we had to do.
But there is little the pilots can do, even though another hijacked aircraft, United Flight 93, is heading for Washington.
At that point, we had no authorization to shoot anyone down.
The President is in his cabin aboard Air Force One.
I was there when he was talking with the Vice President and Secretary of Defense, and this was not an easy thing. It's a decision that can't be made by others other than the President.
Moments earlier, in a hardened bunker beneath the White House, the Vice President is with Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta.
He's just methodical in the way he goes about doing things, but he's very effective in terms of his cool, collected way of getting things done.
I had a yellow legal pad with a list.
Cheney personally compiles a list of possible threats from the air.
It had tail numbers, too.
Of the flights that you didn't know where they were?
That we couldn't account for.
At first, it was one of a few planes that they had questions about.
White House photographer David Borer watches the tense moment and records it on film.
Eventually, it narrowed to Flight 93. That was the biggest threat at that point.
If you take the trajectory of the plane, Flight 93, after it passes Pittsburgh, and draw a straight line, it's going to go to Washington, D.C.
You just had to do something instantaneously.
And there was a PIOC staffer who would keep coming in with updates on Flight 93's progress towards D.C.
Did you have any thoughts at the time as to what the target of that airplane might be?
I thought probably White House or Capitol. We found out later from interviewing people who were detained, al-Qaeda members, that said the fourth plane was intended for the White House.
The decision was made to try to go intercept Flight 93.
The significance of saying to a pilot that you were authorized to shoot down that plane full of Americans is that's an order that had never been given before.
Very, very tough decision, and the President understood the magnitude of that decision.
The President did give the order to shoot down a civilian plane if it was not responding properly. And it was authority requested through channels by Secretary Rumsfeld. The Vice President passed the request. The President said yes.
It was a totally different circumstance for our country. The thought of having to shoot down one of our own civilian aircraft.
Do you remember your own thoughts as to what you were thinking that we've...
Yeah, that this was a very difficult proposition, but it had to be done. If we had been able to intercept the planes before they hit the World Trade Center, would we? And the answer was absolutely yes.
And the President gave the VP authority to make that call. It was a chilling moment,
The Vice President briefed into the conference that the President had given us permission to shoot down any civilian aircraft that threatened Washington, D.C. Again, in the National Military Command Center, everything stopped for a short second as the impact of those words sunk in.
The rules have changed. We could do something about it now.
Colonel Bob Marr is in command at the Northeast Air Defense Sector base in Rome, New York.
I got the call, and the words that I remember as clear as day was, "We will take lives in the air to preserve lives on the ground."
Marr orders his air controllers tell the pilots to intercept Flight 93.
Nothing any controller would ever want to pass to a pilot, to shoot down an airliner filled with innocent people.
And we, of course, passed that on to the pilots. United Airlines Flight 93 will not be allowed to reach Washington, D.C.
The closest fighters are two F-16 pilots on a training mission from Selfridge Air National Guard Base near Detroit.
So we were able to get hold of them on the radios and said, "Hey guys, we may need you to come down south and try and head off United Airlines Flight 93.
But there's a problem.
The real scary part is that those guys are up there on a training mission. They don't have any weapons on board they can use.
We started receiving reports from the fighters that were heading to intercept. The FAA kept us informed with their time estimates as the aircraft got closer and closer.
First question that came from my mission crew commander, the individual that's in charge of the operations floor, said, well, sir, what are they going to do? I said, we're going to put them as close to that airplane as we can get, in view of the cockpit, and convince that guy in that airplane that he needs to land.
And if that doesn't work, without any weapons, what can the fighter pilots do except crash into the hijacked plane?
Well, as a military man, there are times you have to make sacrifices that you have to make.
And at some point, the closure time came and went, and nothing had happened. So you can imagine everything was very tense in the NMCC. We had basically lost situation awareness of where this airplane was.
Flight 93 is about 175 miles north and west of Washington, flying over Somerset County, Pennsylvania.
At about 10 o'clock, I called my sister Jody. I hadn't heard anything from her that morning. And we were talking about what was going on, you know, in New York and at the Pentagon.
Rick King is the assistant chief of the Shanksville, Pennsylvania Volunteer Fire Department and the proprietor of Ida's Country Store.
She said to me, Rick, I hear a plane. And I said, yeah, and she said, it's really loud.
Just outside Shanksville, Valencia McClatchy is startled by the noise.
Just as I had heard the roar, I glanced out my front window and just caught a glimpse of a reflection of the sun hitting on something.
And I could hear the engine screaming, and seconds later it hit. And I remember the ground just shook.
It almost jolted me to the point of losing my balance.
My sister said to me, oh my God, Rick had crashed, and I said, I know. And I said, I gotta go.
I had my camera right by the doorway. I grabbed my camera as I was going out the door, opening the door. It's very startling against that clear blue sky to see that huge ball of smoke coming up.
I placed a phone call then to our 911 center in Somerset.
Terry Schaefer is the Shanksville fire chief.
Pulling into the crash site, I remember just seeing vehicles everywhere, firefighters' vehicles, other fire department vehicles, just a lot of confusion.
But when I got there, you know, I wondered to myself, where is it? You know, there was just, the plane was just totally disintegrated.
It's a smell that you'll never forget, a smell of jet fuel, burnt flesh.
You know, after about the first 5 or 10 minutes, we realized that we didn't have any survivors.
My role is to determine the cause and manner of death, recover the remains, identify the remains, and return the remains to the families. That's my role in every case.
Somerset County Coroner Wallace Miller arrives at the crash site.
So everybody's just kind of walking around. And after a few minutes, I did run into Rick.
He wanted to see what I had seen. And as we were walking through, I remember looking up into the hemlock, into the trees.
You could see all kinds of stuff hanging out of the trees, like socks and pieces of suitcase and luggage and seat covers and seat belts. And
the only thing we didn't see were people.
Nothing to indicate that that there was even anybody on the plane.
You know, we're trained to help people. We're trained to rescue people. And we couldn't do any of that.
Up above, a fighter jet streaks by.
It was about, 10:03 that the fighters reported that Flight 93 had crashed.
Eventually, of course, we never fired on any aircraft.
When you heard the plane was down without a shot being fired at it, do you remember what you said?
We just witnessed an act of heroism.
In Washington,
you see the smoke. It's down on the mall.
There is little information.
We just had a few bombings here.
Just rumors.
You know there was a car bomb at the State Department?
The day just didn't end at 93. We were responding to possible hijackings. We had a car bomb reported at the State Department.
It ran on the crawler on the TV that a car bomb had exploded outside the State Department.
Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage is a former Navy SEAL.
I went out and looked with diplomatic security and didn't see anything, and called my colleagues around town and on the video conference screen and said there was nothing to it.
It was frustrating. We flew 7 hours, and the worst part of it was that because of the communications problems that existed during that day, I couldn't talk to anybody in Washington.
Secretary of State Colin Powell is in the air on his way back from Lima, Peru.
There were rumors that the fourth plane might have been heading either to the White House or to the State Department. We didn't know. Who could have imagined?
At that moment, you have to worry about the continuity of the United States government. It's very clear that Washington was under attack.
We arranged for the evacuation of the congressional leadership, especially Denny Hastert, the Speaker, who was in the line of succession for the presidency after me. Whatever was going on, that the government of the United States would survive.
Congressional leaders are safe. Aboard military helicopters, they fly to a top-secret bunker.
There was a granite-like stone on the sides. I mean, literally there it was, like a cave.
The bunker, part of a nuclear survival plan, equipped with food and phones. A secret State Department report says there are 19 emergency operating facilities for dispersing federal officials located within a 300-mile radius of Washington.
Well, the hope was that the government could go on, but the feeling was that if there was a group of people who would be in a position to make the decision about how the government goes on, it ought to be the leadership, Republican and Democratic, Senate and House.
The president, too, is safe in a protective cocoon at 45,000 feet.
The fear ran so deep that a concept that was a Cold War concept that I had never heard of actually came into play that day, and the fear was that this was an attack whose intent was to decapitate the government. In other words, to take out the congressional leaders, to take out the president, to take out the vice president, so our government could not function. Decapitation.
Was there any talk in the PIAC about the fact that they may be trying to decapitate the United States government?
Certainly that was a thought that occurred to me, and I assume others as well, too. That's in part why, number one, I urged the president not to return until we could find out what was going on. It was important that we not bunch up in Washington.
It was very clear that they were going for symbols of power and for the seats of power. And to bring the president back and to put him in the same building with the vice president would have been foolhardy, frankly, because decapitation then of the U.S. government is quite easy.
But no one in the back of the plane knows where Air Force One is going.
Everybody was looking out going, the plane just took a sudden left. We're definitely not going back to Andrews.
At one point, Ari Fleischer, the press secretary, came back and said, this is off the record. The president is being evacuated. The president being evacuated for his safety and the safety of the country.
TV monitors aboard the president's plane show flickering images of the destruction in New York and Washington.
Some stations would fade in and fade out, so we weren't getting complete reports, just kind of pieces bit by bit.
It is just 50 minutes since the second tower of the World Trade Center was struck.
You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
It is 9:59 a.m.
The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed. It folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed. The building has collapsed.
Whew. This is what it looked like moments ago. My God.
Another 30 minutes ticked by.
They're very strong buildings, as you remember from the blast the last time. So,
But what does it take as an engineer to do the job? Oh, no.
The second and last tower has just collapsed.
The second tower. Both trade towers have now been attacked and destroyed, with thousands of people either in them or in the immediate area adjacent to them.
Duff and Nasty watch from their jet fighters high overhead as the towers collapse.
I kind of just looked back over my shoulder and I looked and said, man,
I called it right away. I said, I can't see Lower Manhattan.
I didn't know what to think. That might be some sort of other attack.
So I went up to take a look at it. So I was right over the top of it, looking down. And as I was looking at it, all of a sudden it just started getting smaller. And to me, it didn't make sense. And to see this thing just falling away from me, and then I realized what was going on. It's absolutely the sickest feeling I've ever had in a plane.
Meanwhile, in the White House bunker,
Mood was very somber at that point. I've seen pictures as we sat there and watched on television, as you could see that first building collapse.
on Air Force One, reporters recoil in horror.
It's worse than any disaster movie. We'd been in the air for 2 hours, and as the plane was beginning to lose altitude, Ari Fleischer came back and told us, the president is going to keep moving.
We didn't have a full load of fuel. I said, well, the nearest secure facility that we can refuel the plane is Barksdale, headquarters of the 8th Air Force. And so we flew into Barksdale.
Air Force One touches down at the air base in Louisiana. It is just before noon. On the tarmac, Fleischer holds a brief news conference.
I said, for the credibility of this president, not only for the American people, but for the world, you need to have press with you to say this is where the president is, what he's doing. It's not enough to have Air Force One jet off into the sunset and have none of us know where he is.
Surrounded by armed guards, the president goes inside to call the White House bunker.
Got on the phone with the vice president, and he said to him, I can't wait to find out who did it. It's going to take a while, and we're not going to have a little slap on the wrist crap.
Air Force One is refueled. President Bush records a statement to the nation.
Oh, there's no question he was angry. He was hot. It was reflected in his words, and I'll never forget it. His first reaction is, we are at war.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
And I swear his eyes were red-rimmed. Not the crying kind of red rim, but a stress and a tension.
The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Air Force One lifts off again with a lighter load. Aboard are just a few key aides and Secret Service agents. The press pool has been trimmed from 13 to 5.
And Ari Fleischer told us, I can't tell you where we're going. And you got the distinct feeling it's because he didn't know, because they didn't know.
I remember thinking it was like being on the Twilight Zone plane because there was nobody around anymore.
The fear was palpable. Fear for the country, fear for the structure of the government, agents fearful of protecting the chain of command, the line of succession.
Jet fighters appear just off the wing.
This fighter jet was so close. It was so close I could see the pilot's face. And I had my face, you know, just pressed right up against the little portal window. And I can't tell you, I was instantly calm.
In his cabin, the president wants to get back to the Capitol.
And finally, he just basically said, I'm not going to let, whoever did this keep the President of the United States out of Washington, D.C. We're going.
But first, another stop at Offutt Air Force Base outside Omaha, Nebraska. The president and his aides disappear into a tiny brick building and descend to a blast-proof bunker. It is now 3:30 in the afternoon.
Well, you go downstairs, and you go downstairs, and you go downstairs, and you go downstairs. I mean, it's a long way down. And then you emerge and go through a series of hallways and special doors, blast doors, and so forth. And then you enter into a conference center, which is, several stories underground.
I do remember going underground.
White House photographer Eric Draper records the moment as the president convenes a meeting of his national security team on a video teleconference.
Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Vice President, myself, Dr. Rice, who was with the Vice President.
And we sat down and the president said, first of all, let me tell you that whoever did this to us, we're going to get them. George, you get ready. Don, you get ready.
He was ice cool, and I thought very appropriately so.
And I remember the president was saying, we're going to find out who did this. We're going to seek them out, and then we're going to destroy them.
And then he said, and I'll be back tonight. I'm coming back tonight. And he said it in a way that it was pretty clear that there was no arguing with him this time.
The Secret Service didn't want him to come back. And he asked me then what I thought, and I said, I think it's okay to come on back.
Just before 5 p.m., Air Force One is readied for takeoff. A few moments later, in the air, the president walks to the rear of the plane.
He just like leaned in and said, "Hey." And I said, "Hey, sir, how's it going?" He goes, "I'm all right, how are you?"
And he pointed at our notebooks, said no, meaning this is off the record, you can't report this.
So I said, "Were you able to reach Mrs. Bush?" And he came over and actually put his, like patted me on the back, and he said, "I just talked to her. Thanks for asking."
There was an antsiness about him. He couldn't wait to get back to Washington. He couldn't wait to do something, say something.
It is late afternoon. Congressional leaders stream back to Washington and gather on Capitol Hill. More than 200 members are waiting.
Congress will convene tomorrow.
As we started to leave the lectern and the area of the steps, somebody on the House side,
someone began to sing God Bless America.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
The president arrives at Andrews Air Force Base.
At approximately 6:42, POTUS boards Marine One, looks very somber, but does salute.
On the way to the White House,
The helicopter flew a path this day over the mall, and off the left side window you could see the Pentagon. So it was the president's first eye-to-eye connection with the attack on our country. And he said aloud to nobody in particular, "The mightiest building in the world is on fire. That's the 21st century war you just witnessed."
at the White House, government officials wait, with Vice President Cheney and Laura Bush.
The First Lady was there when he arrived, and they embraced.
When you first saw the president that day, when he arrived back, can you describe what he was like, what his mood was like?
Well, for all of us, it was somber. It had been a very emotional day.
Was he angry?
Determined, I would say.
I could tell he was angry. I could tell he was as emotional as any of us about the day.
Darkness falls across the east.
No trade centers. There is no trade centers.
In New York, exhausted rescuers desperately search for survivors.
Although Tower 2 was the second tower to be struck, it was the first to fall down. And that's where my brother was.
Air Force Public Affairs Officer Don Arias last talked to his brother Adam moments before the second tower was struck.
I knew that night that when he didn't come home from work, that he didn't make it. I just knew in my heart that he didn't make it.
And in Washington, National Guard Humvees patrol the streets.
And the city was just different. It was so quiet here, so quiet. There were the helicopters above, but it was still very quiet.
In the White House, the president prepares to address the nation.
The word war crept into the language, and then it went out again, and we argued whether it was the right word.
Well, he used the word during the course of the day that we were at war. My recollection is that he was concerned about that his speech that night needed in part to be reassuring to the American people.
He made a number of edits and suggestions, and he finalized his words, and he addressed the American people from the Oval Office.
The president sitting at his desk on the other side, just moments away from addressing the nation. And in the frame, you can see the opening words to his statement.
It is 8:30 in the evening.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack.
In the bunker below, CIA Director George Tenet and members of the president's cabinet and national security team watched the speech.
It was one of those, moments where you can hear a pin drop.
We had watched him downstairs in the PIOC, and then he came and joined us, and we, congratulated him. It was the first time we were all together. And it was a tense time, but I recall it also as being a calm time.
The president's normal routine, particularly in a large setting like that, is to start with the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and go on through the members who were present to get the latest report.
We really began to to hand out assignments for the next day to begin to think about response.
He made it clear that this was not to happen again. I think he used words like, don't ever let this happen again.
There was a task ahead of us. There was a serious job ahead of us. And the president was ready for it. And we were there ready to help him.
And that's where they started planning for what would become war.
I mean, the order was get the troops ready. It was that simple. It was that direct. Get the troops ready.
It is 9:30 p.m. Only 12 hours have passed since the attacks began. A day that dawned full of possibility and promise ends on the eve of war.
So much in just 12 hours, and who among us ever imagined that we would see the country go into a sort of a lockdown? But that's what we did that day, and we haven't really come out of it yet. Symptomatic of that, the fact that the Vice President right now back in a secure facility.
Precisely. Thanks very much. That's extraordinary to relive it in that fashion. Charles Gibson. When we come back this evening, we'll relive something else. I hope you'll stay with us for our primetime coverage on this anniversary of 9/11.
From ABC News, this is 9/11. Tonight, how critical decisions meant life or death for those inside the Twin Towers. An exclusive ABC News USA Today report. What really happened after the planes hit?
The bottom wing is hung in my office door 20 feet from where I am. And I'm saying to myself, oh Lord, this plane is gonna explode and I'm gonna die.
Miraculous stories of survival, told by those who escaped death when so many others did not. An ABC News investigation. How vulnerable is our nation's security 1 year later?
We are vulnerable to covert delivery of weapons of mass destruction.
You will be shocked to see what we discovered when we tested the system that's supposed to protect us from nuclear terrorism.
If they're really on top of it, they should pick this up.
ABC's Brian Ross with an exclusive report that you cannot miss. Barbara Walters with an intimate look at the grieving families struggling to rebuild their lives after the worst of tragedies.
This is their father, this is our husband, and we're talking about ashes and body parts and other people's ashes, and it's just sick.
ABC News has followed their progress for the last year. An exclusive look at how far they have come. And Diane Sawyer with 63 symbols of loss and love. The widows and babies of 9/11. Their stories will touch and surprise you. The renewal of life. Now reporting, Peter Jennings.
The former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who helped this city get through September the 11th, said recently what many people in this city feel. Whatever the terrorists were trying to accomplish, this city is stronger, not weaker, for their murderous actions. It could also be said for the country as a whole. We've all worked very hard in the last year to comprehend the details of what happened in those buildings in less than 2 hours from the time the planes hit until they collapsed. And no one has done, we think, a more comprehensive job than USA Today. And it was a huge job to document what was happening in the trade towers after they were hit because so many people died. We've been working with the newspaper, and you will see that with some astonishing computer renditions, we've come to realize that very often the tiniest decision meant the difference between living and dying. I might add that some of those who survived have been very generous with their time so that we could understand.
I was on the phone talking to one of my colleagues in another office, heard a loud roar, and I had to turn 90 degrees to look out the window to look north, and right there, coming right at me, was this large passenger jet, maybe just 2 or 3 plane lengths away from me. And I just ducked my head and prayed to God to save me, because I thought this was it.
8 floors below George Slay, Fred Eichler was standing at his window. He saw it too.
I mean, we were staring into the cockpit. We could not recognize anything. I mean, it did happen kind of quickly, but we saw the entire plane and then watched it crash into the building.
Got out of the elevator, I heard a whoosh, and I looked up, and the 3 elevators directly across from me were on fire. They just had exploded, and the doors on the elevators were ajar. I immediately decided I just have to go where I don't see flames. I ran out of the elevator into the first office I could find. It was an insurance company called Accelera. A gentleman there named Fred Eichler told me that he had actually just seen an American Airlines jet fly into the building while he was sitting having his breakfast.
Strangers thrown together in terrible circumstances. They would need each other to survive.
The hallway burst into flames outside of our door, so we were trapped in our office, and we could not get out. We believed that people knew we were up there, but I'm not quite sure if anybody really did know.
On an express elevator, Chris Young was alone, headed for the North Tower lobby.
I was in sort of a good mood, and so I started sort of just like jumping up in the elevator to see if I could get that, lighter than air feeling or whatever when the elevator's speeding down. It was just at that point that there was just a huge, massive shaking of the elevator that made it screech to a stop. And it was quickly followed by this just huge gust of wind that pushed into the elevator and sort of pushed in all this fine yellow dust into the elevator. And I mean, as rational as it was or whatever, I had been jumping in the elevator. It was like, oh my God, I've done something.
91 floors above, George Schley struggled to recover after the plane hit a few feet over his head.
And everything came down around me. My ceiling tiles all collapsed around me. The light fixtures came down. All the books on my bookshelf tumbled on top of me. So I didn't really feel the impact. I was distracted by all of this. And we got out of our office space into the hallway. There was some smoke on the floor, but we headed to the 3rd stairway. We looked up and there was debris in the stairwell above us. There was some debris in the form of sheetrock on the stairs. We just lifted that against the wall and we were able to walk down the stairs from that point. There was no one coming down when we entered into the stairwell.
And no one ever would. The 92nd floor would become the bottom of the North Tower tomb. The upper floors were sealed off. The plane's impact had collapsed all 3 escape stairwells. Elevator shafts were destroyed or had become infernos. Rescue would prove impossible. Those people trapped in the upper 19 floors would not survive. The South Tower was 125 feet from the north, and on the 105th floor, a large meeting had assembled in the offices of Aon Insurance. Joe Ditmar was at the meeting.
The lights flickered. A gentleman came into the room and said that there had been an explosion in the first tower, and that we had to leave because we were being evacuated.
Throughout the South Tower, the alarm spread and evacuation began. Most of the people had little idea of what had happened to the North Tower or how severe the damage was. People on the 105th floor began down through the stairwell, and on the 90th floor, they noticed a door open. They filed out of the stairwell.
We went out onto the 90th floor. I don't even know whose offices were there, and that's when we first had the chance to experience what was going on. Worst 30 seconds of my life. The first thing that I noticed was screaming. A man, very distinct voice of a man screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God." And a woman just shrieking. So obviously I had to look. I looked out. You could see that the first tower was engulfed in flames. There was a gaping hole in the building. And then things just coming out of the building, just falling out of the building. The furniture and papers and the people.
Person just wandered to the side of the building, obviously choking and blind from the smoke. And since the floor had been blown away, was jagged, probably didn't realize where the end of the floor was and just fell right out of the building. And as you stand there at the window, you just watch this body drop. And your stomach and your knees drop right along with that. And then another, and then another.
That just scared the daylights out of me. I just immediately started telling people, you need to leave. Whatever it is, we'll find out when we're downstairs.
Florence Jones worked for Baseline Financial with offices on the 77th and 78th floors of the South Tower, connected by an escalator. She remembers pleading with Jill Kemble, a receptionist on the 78th floor, to leave.
I could tell she was scared. And I just kept saying, get in an elevator, get in an elevator. She wasn't going to leave until someone more superior in charge told her to leave. And she didn't do that until the chief financial officer said to her, look, if you want to leave, go ahead and leave. The last I saw of her, she went out to go wait for an elevator to go down.
If the boss stayed, the staff stayed. Today, your fate was sealed if you stayed too long. In the South Tower, workers from most floors were heading down through the 3 emergency stairwells and using the building's 99 elevators. Thousands of people went steadily out of the building. But in the North Tower, the conditions were getting steadily worse. Fred Eichler and Jonathan Judd were still trapped in offices on the 83rd floor.
I don't know if it was metal or glass, but you could see glittering things coming down. Big crashes. You could hear big crashes, and everyone said, stay away from the windows. You could see tons and tons of papers flying, like a ticker tape parade. And it continued to get smokier and smokier.
My wife, my parents, and one of my daughters called, and I never told them what the real situation was. I never told them that there was an inferno right outside our door. But realistically, I really believe that was the last time I'm going to speak to them.
Somewhere near the North Tower lobby, Chris Young's elevator was still stuck. Young, alone, was desperately pushing emergency buttons.
This computer voice came on saying that your call had been received, that someone would be there that someone would be with you shortly. And it just kept repeating that message over and over, and there was no way to make it stop. It was about 15 minutes or so, and then someone did come on to the intercom, a live person. And the first thing they said was, anybody in here? I sort of yelled out, yes. I asked him what had happened, but he really wouldn't give me any specifics. He just said, it's an emergency situation, and that someone would be there shortly to get me out of the elevator.
The mortal peril of those trapped in the North Tower's upper floors was becoming increasingly clear. Desperate for air, windows were broken. People clung to the side of the building 100 stories up. Workers in the South Tower looked at them from just feet away.
To see these young people doing the sign of the cross and jumping, you were like, oh my God. It's got to be awful up there for people to make that choice to want to jump and know that you're going to die. And you can't pull your eyes away, as much as you'd like to, just out of sheer dignity for them. You'd like to, but it's very hard to do that. I kept saying to myself, this is not a movie. This is real. These are real human beings that are smashing. It's just, that's an awful thing to see.
Florence Jones had gone to the 78th floor elevators, but they were now packed.
And I was like, we're not getting out this way. We have to go downstairs, make sure everyone is off the floor, and we gotta leave. And that's the only reason why I'm here today, is because I ran down the escalator with them to make sure everybody was off the 77th floor.
On this day, the smallest decision would be crucial. 7 floors above, on the 84th floor of the South Tower, a similar scene was playing out. Brian Clark worked for Eurobank.
One woman in particular, Susan Polio, did not know she was about to see what she saw. And as she looked up, all of a sudden, she spun in horror and ran back to me, the 5 yards back from the glass I was. And Brian, she said, people are dying, she said. And I said, Susan, I know it's a terrible thing. And I put my arms around her. I said, come on, let's get you composed. And I walked her off our trading floor, down the center hallway to the west side of the building, which is where the ladies' room is. And I said, get yourself together. And it really is that walk, I think, that saved my life.
Throughout the South Tower, people were going down through the stairwells or using the elevators. And then, just before 9 a.m., there was an announcement broadcast throughout the building.
The statement was, it appears that Trade Center 2 is now safe. You can go back to your offices. And at which point, a lot of people stopped dead in the stairwell.
I actually saw people going back in the other direction, people going back to their places of work. They were, hey, going back. I remember clearly saying, well, where are you going? And he said, I'm going back to work. I said, God, you're more dedicated than I could ever hope to be.
78 is a sky lobby. There's express elevators that go from 78 to 1. So me and 5 of my friends decided, okay, let's walk up a couple of flights. Why walk down? It was really hot. So we walked up back to 78, figuring on catching an elevator.
The 78th floor sky lobby had a bank of 12 express elevators and 24 local elevators to the upper floors. The lobby had become packed with people, some heading out of the building, some back to their offices.
That's where I saw Mary, and she said, in words that I shouldn't use here, that there was no conceivable way she was going to walk down 90 more flights of stairs or 78 more flights of stairs. She was taking the elevator. The elevators were running. Come on. And just had a gut feeling. I can never really explain it 100%. Something that just told me, no, keep walking.
Whether to use the stairs or wait for an elevator, another fateful decision. 1 floor below, Florence Jones looked south from the 77th floor windows.
I could see straight across the floor, which was all glass. And I could not figure out on a bright, sunny, cloudless day what this black thing was that was approaching the building.
4 floors above, Stanley Primnath saw the same thing.
And for no apparent reason, I just raised my head, watching towards the harbor, the Statue of Liberty, and what I saw was a giant aircraft come in eye contact, eye level towards me. And I dove under my desk. This impact was so great that I got temporarily deaf. Couldn't hear anything. It looks like a demolition crew came in and just knocked everything flat. Steel doors were knocked off. All the walls were flattened. All the desks and every piece of furniture was damaged. All the computers were like smithereens. The ceiling caved in, and part of the 82nd floor collapsed. And I'm hiding under a steel desk, the only one that stood intact. My Bible was on top of that desk.
Stanley Primnath had survived the direct hit. The nose of the plane had come right through the windows of his floor.
And the bottom wing is hung in my office door 20 feet from where I am. And the wing starts to burn. I couldn't see the rest of the plane. And I'm saying to myself, oh Lord, this plane is gonna explode and I'm gonna die. I have to get out of here as fast as possible.
3 floors above Stanley, on the 84th floor, Brian Clark's decision to walk a colleague to the bathroom had taken him out of the plane's path. Nearly 50 people died on the east side of the floor. On the west, there was a handful of survivors. Brian Clark and Ron DeFrancesca were 2 of them.
I got knocked flying. And, the false ceilings all came down, and debris and dust, and all the lights went out. And was louder than you could imagine.
And for the next 10 seconds, I experienced terror. And the building swayed. The building just went a long way. It seemed like for 10 seconds, one way. This felt like it was going yards. And I thought we were going over. I thought we were falling to the west into the Hudson. But it stopped and didn't move and then came back to vertical.
My colleague and he was screaming, and I grabbed him, and I led this man into the stairwell with me. And we proceeded on our journey.
Now the people in the North Tower stared at the South Tower to see the horror that mirrored their own.
At that point, we made a decision to try to get out. As we got to maybe 5, 10 feet to where we thought we were going, all the lights went out, and we could not see anything. So we decided to go back to our office, and there wasn't a word that was spoken. It was dead silent. And the only noise you heard was the ceiling tile falling all around you. Either be rescued or die. Those were the choices.
Such choices. Joe Ditmar chose not to take an elevator and walk down the stairs. Brian Clark chose to help a distressed colleague to the bathroom, away from the windows and a floor that exploded on impact. Florence Jones chose to go down a floor to 77 to organize the evacuation of her offices. All of them survived.
For me, that decision was crucial because everybody practically on that floor died on 78. And where I would have been standing, there would have been no way I could have gotten out of the way of that airplane.
The United plane had devastated the South Tower from the 78th through the 84th floors. Hundreds of people had been standing in the 78th floor sky lobby waiting for elevators. Only 10 of them are known to have survived. They were standing at the far north end of the lobby, very near the only stairwell that had not been destroyed. Mary Jose was there. So were Kelly Ryer and Donna Spira.
There was like 6 of us. And I says, is anybody going up? And my friend just turned around and said, I'm not going back up. As soon as she said that, the plane hit.
As I woke up, I turned and I saw fire, and my face felt like it went on fire. And then I turned and I felt like my back was on fire, and I rolled. But I couldn't roll far because there were people around me.
And I remember walking into the elevator and then just feeling a blast like nothing I'd ever felt before, just a wave of heat. And just, I was smashed into the back wall of the elevator and just crumpled to the floor. When I regained my senses, there was an inferno in the elevator shaft that was coming into the elevator. The fire was coming in, the hot embers were flying into the elevator, and it was filling up with black smoke. I realized then what the people in Trade Center 1, the choice they were making, which was, you'll do anything but burn to death. It's the most horrifying experience that I've ever faced in my life. And I remember thinking, well, if I can stand up long enough to breathe in the hot smoke, I'll die of smoke asphyxiation, and I won't know that I'm going to burn to death trapped in this elevator.
I remember seeing my friend laying on the floor. My pocketbook had fallen on her. She wasn't conscious. None of my friends that I was with on 78 made it. I just couldn't see. It was so dark. I just couldn't see anybody. I couldn't help anybody because I was hurt.
I knew there was a stairwell, and I crawled till I was blocked by the elevator banks. Then I stood up, and fortunately the door opened to touch. And the lights were on in the stairwell, So I basically yelled back that if anybody could hear me, because as far as I knew, there was nobody alive. And nothing, heard nothing back. And then I proceeded to go down.
I then, I guess, started to look around and realized that the doors hadn't closed all the way and that maybe I could get out of the elevator. And I start pulling, but the fire is coming up from the floor and it's singeing my arms every time I'm trying to do this. And as I open the door and I look forward, what I saw was the whole floor was on fire. The people that were in the sky lobby, most of them appeared to have been killed instantly. There were some people who seemed to be alive. Those that were alive, as we're crawling along, as I'm crawling along, you're touching each body to see if the person's alive or not alive.
And that's when I met up with Kelly. That was a miracle because there wasn't many people that made it on that floor.
The first thing I said to her was, I guess God wants us to live. Because there's no other explanation for why we were alive that I could see from what we walked through.
I just held on to Kelly for dear life. I held on to his belt buckle. And we just started going down the stairs. And there wasn't many people going down the stairs.
Kelly and Donna, who was badly wounded, were on their way down out of the smoke and the flames. Just below, Mary Jose was about to fall into the arms of a stranger, Eric Thompson, who was looking up the shattered stairwell.
All I could see was blackness behind her. The door looked like it was wedged open. The pipes were down. There was water running. The ventilation had fallen. The sheetrock was laying crumbled. There was soot on everything. I just heard someone before. I heard her before I saw her, and she's like, "Is anyone down there? Can you please come and help me? I'm hurt."
I don't think I really ever knew how badly I was hurt. At all. I didn't know I had a blow to the head. I mean, I didn't know that part of my arm was gone, you know. I didn't. I had no idea, and I guess it's part of it is your systems just take over. Adrenaline just keeps pumping, and you just go.
On this day, strangers rescued strangers. In the South Tower, on the highest floors, only 17 people are known to have made it safely out of the building. Virtually no one made it unassisted. There would be no emergency help from below.
We entered the stairs on the 84th floor, stairway A, and only went down 3 floors when we met a woman and a smaller man, but a very heavy-set woman coming up, and she was insistent, "Stop, stop. You can't go down. We, referring to her associate, we've just come off a floor in flames and we've got to go higher, get above the smoke. You can't," and she just wouldn't stop talking and said, "No, you got to go up." And very quickly, 15, 20 seconds into that conversation, or the debate, if you like, I was distracted. And I heard this banging on the wall and a voice yelling in the darkness on the 81st floor, "Help, help, I'm buried, I can't breathe, is anybody there, help?" And I was able to push the drywall back and get onto the 81st floor.
Just feet away, Stanley Premnath, who survived the plane's impact under his desk, was still alive. But he was trapped behind the burning and collapsed walls of his former office.
And I started to crawl. And I'm saying, "Don't leave me to die. This is Stan from the loans department. Please, help me, somebody."
But I could see through this opening. I said, "Now you must jump. You've got to jump over this. That's the only way out."
He just grabbed me around the shoulder and the neck, and he just pulled with everything he got and yanked me through that wall. And with the impact, I just fell on top of him. And I hugged that man. I gave him the biggest kiss, and I said, "You are my guardian angel."
And he gave me the biggest hug imaginable. And to break the clench, more or less, I said, "I'm Brian." He said, "I'm Stanley. You know, we're going to be brothers for life."
Back in the stairwell, all the other survivors had decided to go up, including Ron DiFrancesco.
Down was the fire, right? So we started climbing and climbing and, you know, looking for a way out, but all the doors seemed to be locked.
To go up or go down, Stanley and Brian had the same decision to make.
And we looked at each other, and I I just instinctively went down. It was in my mind that regardless of what that lady had said, that I needed to test what was below. I would go down, and if we were stopped by something, we were stopped, but if not, we just keep going.
66 floors below, Joe Ditmar was close to the safety of the streets.
There was a guy, a security guy, around the 15th floor, and he was singing. I don't even remember what he was singing, but he was in the middle of singing, and then he'd stop and he'd say, "You're gonna remember this day for the rest of your life. Be proud to be an American. You're gonna remember this day for the rest of your life."
No one would know, of course, that time was short and the towers were about to fall. And as we've seen, complete strangers were thrown together in the most desperate of circumstances. They would help each other survive.
When we come back, they survived the plane's impact, but how would they survive the unthinkable, the collapse of the towers?
I just thought that that this was going to be a tomb. I prayed, please God, make it quick.
ABC's coverage of 9/11 will continue in a moment.
They were American heroes fighting the war against terror. But did they bring terror home? 4 soldiers accused of killing their wives. Friday, what you don't know about the Fort Bragg murders. John Miller investigates on the season premiere of 2020, Friday.
George Stephanopoulos. He's never done anything just the same old way. And Sunday mornings will be no exception. Starting this Sunday, it's a new This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Sundays, this is where news will be made.
Was watching this coverage on ABC News, then watching the second tower collapse in disbelief, and then looking over at my mom and saying, my goodness, I think thousands of people have just died. The whole day just being totally emotionally wiped out.
Good evening, I'm Lorna Barrett. There were many local ceremonies today commemorating the one-year anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Hundreds of people gathered at Lakeview Cemetery to remember the victims who lost their lives, also to show appreciation for the many public service workers all over the greater Cleveland area who risk their lives every day to keep us safe. Pieces of the World Trade Center can now be seen and touched at a permanent public monument in Eastlake. The America Remembers Memorial was unveiled at the Boulevard of 500 Flags. It's the only memorial that includes wreckage from all 3 crash sites. And 1 year later, U.S. airlines are still feeling the impact of the terrorist attacks. Especially today, air travel is down significantly. More than 3,000 flights were canceled across the country. And our complete team coverage of 9/11 1 year later continues tonight on News Channel 5 at 11. Ted Henry is live in New York, plus live reports from the Pentagon and Western Pennsylvania.
I remember sitting on my couch that morning watching these bizarre events unfold and just in disbelief thinking to myself, how could this be happening to our country? But you know, those events, they changed the United States of America as we know it.
ABC News 9/11 continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back. In the next half hour, we're going to continue our moment-by-moment reconstruction, which we did with USA Today, of what happened inside the Twin Towers in the final moments before the buildings fell. The fires in the highest floors were out of control. Rescue to those floors was impossible. No skyscraper had ever collapsed because of fire, no matter how severe. So how could anyone expect it now? In the South Tower's 78th floor sky lobby, those survivors nearest the stairwell who could walk were now heading down. But many more people lay there in shock and in need of help, including Ling Young.
We can't find the stairs. We're afraid to move because I don't know how safe the floor is. So we decided, you know what, we're just going to sit around. We're going to wait for help. And that probably is a good 10, 15 minutes.
Into this desperate place, another stranger arrived, wearing a red bandana.
There's a man who came up out of nowhere, say, hey, I found the stairs, follow me. So we walked down about maybe, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 15 floors Then I turned around, I saw him carrying another woman in his back. He dropped the woman down, and he said, you know, you gotta walk, because I'm going back upstairs. And that's the last time I saw him.
There was just this guy, and I don't know who the guy is, that was just in the doorway, and all you heard him say was, over here. The door was open, and you could see a light.
Over and over, there are reports of one man systematically pulling people to their feet and heading them down the stairs.
The man in the red bandana, that would be Wells. That would be the way he would react.
Wells Crowther, a securities trader on the 104th floor. He had been a volunteer firefighter since he was 16. He always carried a red bandana in his back pocket. Like his father, when Wells' parents heard the stories, they knew.
When I heard the man in the red bandana, it went straight to my heart, and I just knew inside. Stepping in out of nowhere and rushing and calling for a fire extinguisher and carrying a victim down to clear air, I just knew it was our son.
In the months afterward, a photograph was circulated among the 78th floor survivors. At least 2 people identified him.
His face is always in my mind. A young kid, short hair, husky. When I saw the picture, I said, that's it.
In the last hour of his life, Wells Remy Crowther, he was a firefighter, which is what he wanted truly to be doing.
Months later, Wells Crowther's body was found in the remains of the South Tower lobby with a group of lost firemen. The stairwells above the floors where the plane hit were now thick with smoke and virtually impassable. Ron DiFrancesco, who had climbed up seeking clear air, was now desperately climbing down. On the 78th floor, in the one stairwell that had not been destroyed, he laid down gasping for air.
Somebody lifted me out of there. I got up and, felt my way towards the stairwell. And at that point, I saw all the drywall down there was on fire. And once I ran past that, the stairwell was clear. I was by myself.
Though no one could know, the Twin Towers were both perilously close to collapse. For those still in the buildings, time was short. On the 83rd floor of the North Tower, a group including Jonathan Judd and Fred Eichler was still trapped in the office.
I don't think we could have survived another 5 or 10 minutes in our office. That's how bad the smoke was getting. I just did not figure we were going to get out. And we were just prepared to die, in the office. I mean, that's what was going through our heads. I was sitting on a chair, and I was facing the door, and about 9:30, I spotted this flashlight.
And you could see the beams of light going through the door, and it was like a godsend.
And it turned out to be a fireman and a building worker. I jumped up, signaled them, and they did come in and basically rescued us.
Saved by rescue workers who reached the 83rd floor of the North Tower. Saved by the glass office doors that let them see the flashlight. Just down the hall, a group of 13 people were trapped inside the offices of General Telecom. The front doors were wood. They couldn't see the flashlight. They were not discovered. All would perish. 83 floors below, Chris Young